I'm sorry, what were?
What things do you regret handling in this matter, specifically with Zach Smith?
What do you think about it? To answer your question earlier, Bill, I have huge regret for my inability to be the effective leader that I should have been in this particular situation. The greatest pain that I have is the people that I serve every single day. The 565 employees that I go to work with every day, the 1,000+ student athletes that we work for every day, and of course, all of Buckeye Nation in this institution. But it's been painful. It's been hard, particularly when people like you reached out to me and wanted me to comment, and I wanted to have an opportunity to correct on some of the things that were being said. Very difficult for me. And so it's been hard, but I'm very supportive of where we are today. We have a valuable lesson that we learned. We're going to move forward, and we're going to be stronger forward. So I'm very supportive of the decisions that have been made.
Bill, please repeat the question.
Yeah. What regrets do you have and how you handled things, especially in terms of Zach Smith?
Well, most of what I know about Zach Smith is work-related. And I've, throughout my career, I've taken an approach when I see someone in distress or someone struggling, I seek to get counsel and help for that person. And the biggest regret, I wish I would know more. If I would know more, I would take action much quicker.
Dan Murphy, ESPN. President Drake and Gene Smith, can you tell us, 10 hours is a long time to deliberate anything. Can you tell us what the conversations were today and why it took that amount of time to reach a decision? And then for Coach Meyer, do you feel you should have been suspended for what happened?
So the discussion today was with our entire board, and so there were many people involved. We had heard the findings a couple of days ago preliminarily, and then had a chance to discuss and deliberate those today. We wanted to be fair, we wanted to be equitable, we wanted to be just, we wanted to be appropriate, and we worked to refine our decisions and our actions to be able to do the best that we could to achieve those goals. This is a very difficult and complicated situation, many things to consider over a long period of time, and the reason that it took 10 hours of this is to try to make sure that we were being thoughtful and considerate in every case. And the goal of all of it is to first learn what we can, and as Gene said, to make our program, our university stronger and better. We know also this is one of those circumstances where there's no right answer. It's very difficult to, not possible to do something that makes everyone happy. And so in that circumstance, we're trying not to seek the sole perfect answer for everyone, but to be fair, to be just, to be equitable, to be appropriate, and to do what we can to help us make our program stronger.
Dan, just to be clear, I was not part of those deliberations.
Now, just a follow-up for Urban too. Do you feel that you should have been suspended, or are you upset with the ultimate decision?
I trust and support our president.
Gene, Ari Wasserman from The Athletic. I'm just wondering, can you give us some more insight as to why the decision was made to fire Zach Smith when you did, if there was prior knowledge to this, because it kind of just happened in Chicago? And Urban, do you feel that you've done an adequate job throughout your entire career reading your employees and making sure that people are, you know, not troubled? Because it seems that Zach Smith, dating back to 2015 and 2013 with the OVI, I mean, what is a coach's responsibility in trying to find those things out and noticing them just based on what you see in the building?
So, Ari, to your question, Urban and I had conversations throughout that day, and ultimately he came to a decision where he wanted to terminate Zach Smith as a result of a number of different things over Zach's tenure. I'd have to really let Urban just articulate that a little bit more, but he made that recommendation. 100% supported it, but it wasn't just because of that singular incident.
Please repeat.
When you're just in the building, given the fact that it seems that Zach Smith's been a troubled employee for 9 years, what is your role as Ohio State's head coach in noticing things, kind of getting a gauge of your employees and making sure that you're aware of the things that go on in their lives, and a little bit more insight into your decision to fire Zach when you did.
Well, as a head coach, you're ultimately responsible for everybody's behavior, and that's a very difficult thing to do. We all know that. However, there were red flags, and I wish I had known. I wish I did a better job of finding things out, or I wish I was told more things. But ultimately, and that's part of the job, that you're ultimately responsible to represent this incredible university, and I wish I had done more. I wish I had known more. The second part was
just the idea or the reason for firing Zach Smith when you guys did.
I received on that week, I can't remember the exact date, that someone told me there was a court date. Was I aware of a court date involving Zach? I said I was not. And they started explaining to me it was a trespassing issue. So I immediately contacted Gene. I told Brian Voltolini to find out more about what had happened. And I actually called Zach Smith in. He was on vacation. I had him come in and say, what was this all about? He told me in great detail what had happened, and that he was dropping his children off at a certain location, and then went to the house and eventually had a citation for trespassing. He made it sound like it was not that big a deal. I told Gene, and Gene and I both decided to just keep him updated. And I was very disappointed. It happened approximately 2 months prior to that. I was very upset that he didn't share that with me. And I made that clear. You have to keep me exactly posted on any situation like this so I can alert Gene. And then I go to media days, and that Monday I find out there's a restraining order. And that's when termination became entered my mind. First of all, the seriousness of a restraining order. And then also, again, the fact that I made very clear that you keep me posted and alert me to any situation, and he did not do that. And later that day, I made the decision to fire him.
Doug Maurice from Cleveland.com. Gene, and I guess President Drake as well. We know Urban was aware of domestic abuse allegations against Zach Smith at Florida in 2009. Gene, were you aware of those allegations when Zach Smith was hired at Ohio State in 2012?
No, I was not.
Is that a problem, and will there be a review of hiring practices at all? Should Ohio State have been informed about that, since Urban knew that when he chose to hire Zach Smith in 2012? Is that something that should have been divulged to Ohio State when he was hired?
Doug, that's a great question. Appreciate it. I had a conversation with our new Vice President for Human Resources today around our hiring practices and how we might be able to expand on our effort relative to our background checks. Obviously, all of our employees go through a standard background check, but the reality is we can probably go deeper with some positions, and that's one that we can go deeper on. So I've committed to work with her as we move forward to implement new tactics and strategies to make sure that we can be a lot more thorough so that hopefully this never happens again. Good question, Doug. Thank you.
And President Drake, you weren't here at that time, but do you feel that was a failure or a mistake on Ohio State's part that Zach Smith was hired here to begin with?
You know, the policies that were in place then were the policies that were in place then, and as Gene said, background checks were done as they are on all employees. It would be good to know more information than that, particularly for particular certain positions. So I, again, support, as Gene said, I know he spoke with HR today about things we can do to have more information when hiring, and that would be something that would be an improvement for the future.
And on the process of the decision-making today, President Drake, what kind of consideration was there given in that process to firing Gene Smith or Urban Meyer?
I would say that, to be fair, we looked at the findings, and then we considered the range of options that might be available, and we wanted to consider the entire range of options that might be available, and then worked hard to find a place that we thought was just, fair, and appropriate. And as I said, again, would lead us to the lessons that would allow us to be a stronger university moving forward.
Tim May, Columbus Dispatch. Dr. Drake, according to the narrative that was given out here, the way I read it, Gene Smith was aware of the Zach Smith situation in 2015 and had confab with Urban Meyer about it. So Urban Meyer's higher up knew about it, immediate higher up knew about it. So where's the breakdown now, and is there some sense in the university that things need to be more clear, or whatever you want to call it, from the standpoint of these kind of situations?
So let me try that again. I'm sorry. So
In other words,
about the allegation at that particular time, and I took it to Urban. My failure as a leader, as an effective administrator, was to include others. My normal practice is always to include others. Now, this particular case did not give me the red flags to cause me to do that, and I failed in that regard, and I should have. So I hopefully, Tim, that answers your question. At the end of the day, I should have included maybe our Vice President of Compliance and Integrity as we continue to try and evaluate what was going on. So that, hopefully that answers your question.
you have to clarify, is Urban Meyer also supposed to contact the compliance department also?
I should have.
You should have.
I should have.
And then one other thing, we may not get to talk to Urban now until September the 3rd maybe, but Coach Meyer, you've been away from football now for 3 weeks, the heart of preseason camp. Until September 2nd, I guess you won't be around, but I don't know, how tough has this been for you in that regard? And number two, I guess what would be your message to Ryan Day and your players?
It's been very tough, one of the toughest things I've experienced, and I have very good players and a very good staff. My message when I get to speak to the team is that I love them dearly. I appreciate all they've done for this incredible university. As I've shared with Dr. Drake, this is one of the best groups I've ever been around, on the field and off, and but it's also one of the best coaching staffs I've had. So I look forward to watching continue to grow and getting updates as we move forward.
Hi, over here, Mark Tracy from the New York Times. This is for Dr. Drake and Gene Smith. Sorry about that. Obviously, this was not, there are a few other kind of, unfortunate instances that have allegedly or indeed have been admitted to have happened around athletics. Mainly, there's troubling allegations regarding a former diving coach and, of course, the Dr. Strauss stuff. Obviously, this spans, in some cases, decades. Clearly, multiple tenures of multiple presidents and athletic directors. Having said that, there are more than one, I guess you could say. And I guess my question for both of you is, do you see the handling of Zach Smith, as kind of an isolated incident unrelated to anything else, or do either of you have broader concerns about the culture in the athletics department?
Thank you. I'll answer that. First, you know that we're a large enterprise. We have 60,000 students on campus and 40,000 employees roughly a day, so we have 100,000 people who are engaged in a variety of activities that are complicated, nuanced, serious. All of those things are happening all the time. So you've mentioned incidents or circumstances that have occurred over, as you mentioned, a span of 40 years and multiple generations of leadership, and with people who have no association with one another, except for they happen to happen here in that enterprise that we mentioned. And so I would like to say a word about the diving coach situation. We're under litigation, so I don't I'm going to say some things that were in an article that was in your newspaper and say those things. This was a circumstance where complaints came to us on a Sunday about a coach in a club sport, not one of our varsity sports. That person was put on suspension and his university access was eliminated that day. An investigation began the next day by our HR and our university. That investigation continued, and during that investigation, within a few days, the police began an investigation, were notified and began an investigation. And then 2.5 weeks after the investigation began, the individual was terminated, and without possibility of rehire. Several other organizations were notified, the USA Diving, the state of Maryland, law enforcement, because there had been alleged incidents there. And then our law enforcement was continuing the investigation. At the request of the original complainant, that investigation was stopped. So this was a situation where there was a complaint on a Sunday. Roughly 2.5 weeks later, after being suspended immediately, 2.5 weeks later, the part-time employee who was this summer club diving coach was terminated without possibility of rehire, and authorities here and across the country were notified. And so I just want to say that particular incident was one that, again, under litigation, I guess I shouldn't say any more than I'm relating from the article in your newspaper, but I think it's fair to say that we tried to do a good job to handle that and get that contained. The incidents that you mentioned that occurred 20, 30, 40 years ago are also under investigation and also the subject of a lawsuit, and I don't have any independent information about that, so I can't talk about that. We look at everything that happens and try to learn from it and to move forward. We think for our athletics program, there are lessons that we've learned in this particular situation, and we want to take those lessons to heart to be better tomorrow than we were yesterday, and that's the goal of a university, honestly, is to learn things, to teach ourselves to be better, and that's what we'll continue to do.
Coach Meyer, Greg Amante, ESPN. You had said you support the decision by the president, but if you could be more specific, knowing that your superiors were aware, do you think you should have been suspended? And follow-up question is, what message do you have for Courtney Smith?
Well, ultimately, I'm responsible for everyone's behavior in the football department, and there was some behavior going on that maybe I was unaware of, but I should have been aware of it. So I fully support our president's decision and respect it. And the second one is?
What message do you have for Courtney Smith?
Well, I have a message for everyone involved in this. I'm sorry that we're in this situation. And I'm just sorry we're in this situation.
What about Shelley's text messages? Why were you not concerned from her messages about this situation?
I was not aware of Shelley's text messages at the time.
We have time for just one more question, folks. I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap it up. I'd like to give it to Clay Hall.
Coach, does this change in any way? Gene addressed some things that they may change. Does it change the way you do business going forward? Maybe hiring or policing the Woody Hayes?
I will say this, that this has been a learning experience. I'm a different person now than I was back in 2009, 2012. My awareness of domestic violence and how serious whenever you hear that kind of accusation, absolutely I've grown, but I've grown over the years, and I will be very cautious. Gene and I have a great relationship. We talk constantly, and I'm sure we haven't had a chance to really have deep conversation about this, but I will not make any hire without having complete open dialogue with Gene and making sure that we are fully aware of what we're getting into.
Okay, with that, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks, everyone, for joining us this evening. Look for that investigative report soon, and have a safe evening. Thank you.